Hello, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. If you're here, chances are you're winding down, tucked in, or simply looking for something calm and curious to drift off to. Whether your eyes are already half closed, or you're still brushing your teeth with one hand while holding your phone in the other, I'm glad you found your way here. Tonight we're going to take a slow, gentle dive into the world of sound. From the quiet hum of your refrigerator to the deep rumble of distant thunder, sound is always with us, even when we're not listening. It's in the air, the ground, and sometimes even in our bones. But don't worry, we'll keep things soft and soothing. No jump scares, no fire alarms, and absolutely no surprise pop quizzes on wave mechanics. Just the steady rhythm of science, patiently unfolding. Now, I do have a small confession. There's always the slight chance that this video might be too interesting and keep you awake. If that happens, well, at least you'll learn something fascinating about the physics of sound. Not the worst way to spend a late night, right? Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Feel free to leave a comment below with your location and your local time. I read as many as I can, and it's truly wonderful to see this sleepy little science community stretching across time zones and continents. If this video gently nudges your brain into a cozy spiral of relaxation, or if you simply enjoy these late-night science rambles, it would mean the world if you tap the like button and subscribe. It helps others find the channel and it lets me keep making more relaxing explorations for you. Alright, let's begin our quiet journey through sound waves and silence. Please remember, while this video might mention things like hearing, the brain, or sleep, it is intended purely for education and relaxation. It is not medical advice or a substitute for professional help. What is sound, really? At first glance, it might seem like an easy question. Sound is just noise, right? The chatter of people walking past, the purr of a cat, the clink of a mug on the table, or the low whoosh of a passing car as you lie in bed. But if we peel back the curtain and take a closer look, sound becomes something much more subtle and far stranger. It isn't just noise, it's a physical phenomenon, a series of vibrations rippling through space. And surprisingly, it doesn't even exist the way we think it does, at least not until we hear it. Let's start at the very beginning. Imagine you're holding a guitar. You pluck one of the strings. Visually, you might see it vibrating ever so slightly, a little blur of movement. That string, in its tiny, trembling dance, is disturbing the air around it. Each vibration pushes against the nearby air molecules, squishing them together before letting them spread back out again. This back and forth jostling sets off a chain reaction, a ripple, through the air. Those ripples travel outward in all directions like concentric circles in a pond. But instead of moving on a flat surface like water waves, these sound waves push and pull in the direction they're traveling like an invisible slinky stretching and compressing through the air. This kind of wave, where the motion of the particles is in the same direction as the wave itself, is called a longitudinal wave. It's different from the kind of wave you might see at the beach, where water moves up and down while the wave rolls forward. Sound waves don't bounce up and down. They squeeze and expand through whatever medium they're in, whether it's air, water, steel, or even the walls of your bedroom. But here's the odd part. Even though these waves are very real, measurable physical disturbances moving through a medium, sound, as we perceive it, doesn't truly exist until it reaches your ears and your brain decides to interpret it. That's right. In a way, sound isn't something out there in the world. It's something your brain creates. Without a listener, a wave is just a wave. Pressure differences in air. It's only when those ripples reach your ear, get funneled down your ear canal, vibrate your eardrum, jiggle some bones, and eventually stimulate nerves in your inner ear that your brain steps in and says, "Ah yes, that was definitely a dog barking." Let's put that in context. Imagine a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it. Classic question. Does it make a sound? Well, physically, yes. The falling tree compresses air, sends vibrations rippling out through the atmosphere, and produces measurable acoustic waves. But psychologically, no sound was heard, because there was no hearing involved. There were only pressure waves. Sound as an experience requires both the wave and the listener. This strange duality makes sound both a physical and a psychological phenomenon. It's real in the same way that light is real, but it also relies on interpretation, just as light becomes color only when your brain decides what to do with it. The world, as it turns out, is full of these little illusions, things that seem simple, but only exist because we're here to notice them. Now back to those pressure waves. What do they really look like? Well, picture a row of tiny air molecules, all minding their business. When a sound begins, the first group of molecules gets pushed together. That high-pressure zone is called compression. Then, as the wave moves forward, there's a region where the molecules are more spread out called rarefaction. Compression, rarefaction, compression, rarefaction. Over and over, like a pulse moving through the air. And they move fast, really fast. In air at room temperature, sound travels at about 340 meters per second. That's over 1,100 feet every second. But in solids, where particles are packed closer together, sound can move much faster, sometimes several times that speed. So yes, if you put your ear against a train track and hear a rumble, that sound may reach you long before the train ever does. Not recommended as a daily activity, but fascinating nonetheless. But not all sound waves are created equal. Some are low and slow, think of a tuba or a thunderclap, while others are high and fast, like a whistle or a mosquito. These differences come from something called frequency. Frequency is just how often the wave cycles, how many compressions pass by each second. It's measured in hertz. 1 hertz means 1 wave cycle per second. Humans, on average, can hear frequencies between about 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. That range shrinks a bit as we age. Teenagers might still hear the faint, high-pitched buzz of a phone on silent, while older adults may find only peace and quiet. Very low frequencies below the threshold of human hearing are called infrasound. Elephants use it to communicate across long distances. Very high frequencies, above human hearing, are called ultrasound. Bats, dolphins, and even some moths can detect it. We humans use ultrasound too, just not for listening. In medicine, ultrasound is used to peer inside the body without making a single cut. It's all sound, just at frequencies we'll never hear. You might wonder if sound is just vibrations, can it travel through anything? And the answer is almost anything, so long as there are particles to push around. In space, where there's essentially no air, sound can't travel. There are no molecules to pass along the vibration. That's why in reality space is eerily silent. Explosions, starbursts, and meteor collisions all completely mute to the human ear. Sci-fi movies may add dramatic booms and whooshes, but the real soundtrack of the cosmos would be a cold, echoless silence. And yet, on Earth, sound is everywhere. It's in the rush of wind through the trees, in the clicking of your ceiling fan, in the subtle creak of wood as your house cools at night. Even in what feels like perfect silence, there are often layers of soft, low-frequency sound we don't consciously notice. Our ears and our brains are always scanning, always interpreting, even when we're asleep. Sound is also deeply linked to memory and emotion. One short melody can send you back 10 years. A single voice can calm or excite you. While we often think of sound as just information, words, alarms, notifications, it's also an emotional thread in the fabric of our lives. A lullaby can make you cry. The purring of a cat can lull you into sleep. The clink of a spoon in a cup might make you feel strangely at home. So, what is sound really? It's motion, it's pressure, it's physics. But it's also sensation, interpretation, and experience. It's a wave that begins in the world and ends in your mind. It is the gentle push and pull of molecules, and the stories they tell when we choose to listen. If you could slow down time and zoom in close enough to watch individual air molecules, you'd see something curious. Even when things seem still, the air is never really at rest. It's a sea of invisible particles dancing in every direction, bumping into each other like caffeinated ping-pong balls. Now imagine that in the middle of all this microscopic chaos, something starts to vibrate. A guitar string, a vocal cord, a phone speaker. That vibration stirs the air around it, pushing molecules forward and causing little pockets of compression. Then, like a line of falling dominoes, each molecule nudges the next, and the disturbance travels outward. That ripple, carried by molecule after molecule, is what we call a sound wave. But what exactly is a wave? A wave is simply a way for energy to move through space without the thing doing the moving actually going very far. Picture a stadium full of people doing the wave. Each person only stands up and sits down, they don't run around the field. But the overall motion of the wave appears to move across the stands. Sound works much the same way. The energy of the original vibration travels forward, even though the individual air molecules only jiggle back and forth in place. Now, not all waves are created equal. Some waves ripple up and down like the surface of water. These are called transverse waves. But sound is a different kind. It's a longitudinal wave. That means the vibration moves in the same direction the wave is traveling, like someone shoving a slinky back and forth along the floor. The coils don't jump up and down. They squash together and stretch out in line with the motion. This squashing and stretching creates two important regions in the wave. Where the air molecules are squeezed together, we have what's called compression. Where they're more spread out, that's called rarefaction. If you could draw this out on a graph, it might look a lot like a sine wave, those elegant looping curves you might remember from math class. But what that graph is really showing is pressure over time, high pressure during compression, low pressure during rarefaction, repeating over and over as the sound wave passes through the air. One of the key properties of these waves is something called wavelength, the distance from one compression to the next. If you imagine the sine wave shape again, it's the distance from the peak of one curve to the peak of the next. Longer wavelengths correspond to lower pitched sounds, like a rumbling thunderclap or the gentle bass notes in a lullaby. Shorter wavelengths give us higher pitched sounds, like birds chirping or the whine of an old kettle heating on the stove. Another important characteristic is frequency. How many wave cycles occur each second? Frequency is measured in hertz. 1 hertz equals 1 cycle per second. If you play a note at 440 hertz, that's the musical note A above middle C. It means the air around your ear is vibrating back and forth 440 times every single second. That's fast. And our ears are impressively sensitive to these changes. Even a slight variation in frequency can change how we perceive a sound. Then there's wave speed. In everyday air, at around room temperature, sound travels at roughly 340 meters per second. That's about 1,150 feet per second. Fast enough that you'll hear someone clap their hands across the room almost instantly. But still slow enough that during a thunderstorm, you can count the seconds between the lightning flash and the rumble of thunder to estimate how far away the storm is. Light travels 1,000,000 times faster, so the delay isn't because the lightning is shy, it's because sound takes its sweet time getting to you. What's interesting is that the speed of sound isn't a constant, it depends on the medium it's traveling through. In solids, where atoms are packed tightly together, sound waves can move much faster. In steel, for example, sound zips along at over 5,000 meters per second, more than 15 times faster than in air. In water, it's somewhere around 1,500 meters per second. That's why whales can communicate across vast distances in the ocean. The water carries their songs efficiently and with far less loss of energy than air would. Speaking of mediums, let's talk about what happens when sound waves encounter boundaries, like walls, floors, or that mysterious void behind the refrigerator. When a wave hits a surface, a few things can happen. Some of the energy is reflected, like an echo bouncing off a canyon wall. Some is absorbed, turned into tiny amounts of heat within the material, and some may be transmitted passing through to the other side, especially if the material is thin or flexible. Have you ever noticed how your voice sounds different when you talk into a pillow? That's absorption in action. The pillow's soft, porous surface captures much of the sound energy, damping the wave and reducing the reflections that would otherwise make your voice feel louder or more resonant. It's the same principle used in recording studios, where foam panels help prevent echoes and standing waves from distorting the sound. Of course, sometimes sound waves interact with each other as well. This is where things get especially interesting, and a bit magical. When two or more sound waves meet, they combine. This phenomenon is called interference. If the compressions of two waves align, they add together, making a louder sound. That's called constructive interference. If a compression meets a rarefaction, they can cancel each other out. Destructive interference, and the sound becomes quieter or even disappears entirely. It's the principle behind noise-cancelling headphones. They generate a sound wave that's the mirror image of the ambient noise around you, effectively neutralizing it before it reaches your ears. You may not realize it, but sound waves can also bend. This bending is known as diffraction, and it's the reason you can still hear someone calling your name even if they're standing around a corner. The waves don't need a clear path. They can bend around obstacles and fill in gaps. The lower the frequency, the better the wave diffracts. That's why bass tends to carry through walls and close doors more easily than treble. And then there's refraction, a change in direction that happens when a sound wave moves from one medium to another or through a medium with changing properties, like air of varying temperatures. Early in the morning or late in the evening, when the air near the ground is cooler than the air above, sound can bend downward, allowing noises to travel unusually far. That's why distant traffic or a barking dog might seem louder just before sunrise. All of this, the reflection, absorption, interference, diffraction, and refraction, adds complexity to the world of sound. In real life, very few sounds travel in straight, clean lines. Most of what we hear is a beautiful mess of interacting waves bouncing, bending, and blending together before finally reaching our ears. Now, if you're lying in bed while listening to this, your ears might be noticing all kinds of little sounds layered in the background. The whir of a fan, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hush of your breath. Every one of those sounds is a little ripple in the sea of air around you, made visible only through your hearing. Your body has become the receiver of an invisible symphony, interpreting pressure changes and turning them into something meaningful, sometimes even something musical. That's the wonder of sound. Beneath the surface, it's all just energy moving through a medium, molecules bumping into molecules, pressure zones expanding and contracting like a gentle tide. But to us, it's so much more. It's laughter and footsteps, lullabies and whispered words. It's the voice of the world around us, moving not in straight lines but in waves. Sound doesn't just appear out of thin air, it needs something to get it started. A spark, a tremble, a jiggle. At the heart of every sound you've ever heard, from the delicate clink of a spoon in a teacup to the thundering roll of a distant avalanche, is a vibration. Something has to shake, pulse, or wobble to set those air molecules into motion. So let's take a curious stroll through the world of sound makers, from strings to sirens, from buzzing bees to the human voice box, and see just how the universe makes itself heard. First up, the humble string. Stretch a string tight, give it a pluck, and you've got yourself a simple musical instrument. That twangy sound is the result of the string vibrating rapidly, pushing and pulling the air around it. The tighter and thinner the string, the higher the pitch it produces. That's why a violin sings in high tones, while a cello hums with a deeper voice. Each vibration of the string compresses and rarefies the air nearby, sending waves rippling outward until they eventually find your ears. But here's a neat trick. Pluck that same string without a soundboard or a resonating body, and it barely makes any noise. It's vibrating, yes, but the energy isn't being efficiently transferred into the surrounding air. That's where resonance chambers come in. The hollow wooden body of a guitar or violin doesn't just look nice. It's designed to amplify the vibrations, helping the sound project outward. It's like giving the wave a megaphone. Now let's trade strings for air. Wind instruments, like flutes, clarinets, and trumpets, create sound by vibrating columns of air inside tubes. Blow across the mouthpiece of a flute, and the air inside begins to resonate. Open or close the holes along the side, and you change the length of the vibrating air column, which changes the pitch. Longer columns produce lower tones, shorter columns give higher ones. It's the same reason a tuba sounds deeper than a piccolo. In both cases, it's not just your breath making the sound. It's your breath setting the air inside the instrument into motion, and the instrument shaping that motion into something musical. And what about the human voice? Your vocal cords, also known as vocal folds, are a brilliant little set of biological strings tucked neatly in your larynx. When you speak, muscles bring the cords close together. Then, as air is pushed up from your lungs, it causes them to vibrate. These vibrations create sound waves, which are shaped by your throat, tongue, lips, and nasal passages into the words you're now hearing. It's a process so smooth and automatic that most people go decades without realizing they're walking around with a built-in wind instrument. Your voice pitch depends on how tight or loose your vocal cords are. Tense cords vibrate faster, creating higher pitches. Relaxed cords vibrate more slowly, producing lower tones. That's why you can go from a silly cartoon squeak to a dramatic movie trailer growl just by adjusting how you speak. And during puberty, particularly for boys, the vocal cords grow thicker and longer, which is why their voices suddenly sound like they've swallowed a foghorn. Then there's percussion, drums, bells, cymbals, marimbas. These instruments make sound by being struck, scraped, or shaken. Hit a drum head, and it stretches and contracts, sending waves into the surrounding air. Strike a bell, and its entire body rings with vibration. Every material has its own natural frequency, a kind of preferred way to vibrate. That's why a wooden block sounds different from a metal triangle, even if they're the same size. The density, shape, and stiffness of the material all influence the resulting sound. Some instruments don't even need strings, tubes, or membranes. Consider the siren. Not the mythical sea-dwelling kind, though those are interesting too, but the mechanical air raid type. A classic rotating siren works by rapidly forcing air through a spinning disc with holes. As the holes pass by a fixed point, they chop the air at regular intervals, creating bursts of pressure, sound waves. The faster the disc spins, the higher the pitch. It's a direct translation of mechanical motion into acoustic energy, with no strings or reeds required. Now let's step into the natural world. Nature, as it turns out, is full of sound makers. Bees buzz because their wings flap incredibly fast, often more than 200 times per second, creating tiny pressure waves in the air. Crickets make their chirps by rubbing their wings together in a process called stridulation. Dolphins and bats use specialized vocal structures to produce high-frequency clicks and squeals for echolocation. Even plants, on very rare occasions, can produce faint popping noises as water moves through their cells, though you'd need highly sensitive equipment to pick that up. Nature is full of tiny concerts, most of them inaudible to us without help. And then there's the curious case of the kazoo. The kazoo. Equal parts charming and annoying, this little instrument doesn't create sound the way you might expect. Instead of blowing through it like a flute, you hum into it. Your humming causes a thin membrane inside to vibrate, which distorts the sound and gives it that unmistakable nasal buzz. It's technically classified as a membranophone, an instrument that uses a vibrating membrane to produce sound. It's not elegant, perhaps, but it's a fun reminder that you don't need complexity to make noise. Sometimes a bit of buzzing is all it takes. Sound can also come from friction. Rub your finger around the rim of a wine glass, and if you do it just right, the glass will begin to hum. What's happening here is that your finger's motion is causing tiny vibrations in the glass. If the frequency matches the natural resonance of the glass, those vibrations build up, amplifying the sound. The glass itself becomes a singing bowl, broadcasting its own voice into the air. Speaking of resonance, it's worth pointing out that most sound-producing systems have a sweet spot, a frequency at which they vibrate most easily. This is called the resonant frequency. When you excite an object at its resonant frequency, it responds with much greater amplitude, making the sound louder and richer. It's the reason a singer can, under very specific conditions, shatter a wine glass with their voice. If they hit the exact frequency that matches the glass's natural resonance and sing loud enough for long enough, the glass vibrates more and more until crack. But before you go around testing your vocal range on household objects, it's good to remember that not all resonant frequencies lead to destruction. In fact, most are simply how objects prefer to communicate. A violin body resonates to enhance the string sound. a drum shell resonates to deepen the tone. Your bathroom, oddly enough, resonates at just the right frequency to make you sound like a Grammy-winning vocalist every time you sing in the shower. In the digital world, sound creation takes another leap. In synthesizers and computer audio systems, sounds can be created without any physical vibration at all. Instead, electrical signals are manipulated to simulate the waveforms of real instruments, or to invent entirely new ones. A sawtooth wave, a square wave, a triangle wave. These are all basic shapes used in digital synthesis. By adjusting their frequencies, amplitudes, and combinations, we can craft the illusion of sound without a single pluck or puff of air. It's a bit mind-bending, really. With the right math and software, we can now create the sound of a violin without a violin, the sound of thunder without a storm. And while these sounds are born of ones and zeros, they still travel through speakers, pushing real air molecules reaching our real ears. The process may begin digitally, but it ends in the same old-fashioned way, with vibrations in the air and interpretation by the brain. All of these mechanisms, whether natural or engineered, follow the same basic rule. Something has to move. Something has to vibrate. Whether it's a string, a reed, a membrane, a column of air, a metal bar, or a rapidly spinning siren disc, sound begins with motion, its energy-given form, broadcast into the world as ripples in a sea of molecules. So the next time you hear a note, a knock, or even a sneeze, pause for a moment and think of what's behind it. A chain reaction of motion, a dance of atoms, a quiet tap on the shoulder from the physical world asking if you're listening. Because when something vibrates, it speaks, and if you're there to hear it, you're part of the conversation. Sound has a favorite party trick. It absolutely refuses to travel alone. Unlike light, which can zip through the vacuum of space like a solo traveler on a cosmic road trip, sound needs company. It needs a medium, a substance to move through. Without it, it's just an awkward vibration waiting for a ride. You can vibrate all you like in a vacuum, but no one will hear you scream, or sing, or hum, or deliver a moving speech. Sound only exists when it has something to push against, something to carry it along. So what exactly is this medium that sound clings to so desperately? Most often, for us earthlings, it's air. The thin, invisible blanket of gas that surrounds us is the perfect carrier for the kinds of sounds we're used to hearing. Every time a sound is made, a drum struck, a word spoken, a cat yowling because you walk past it the wrong way, it creates pressure changes in the air. Those changes ripple outward, passing through countless air molecules that jostle each other like an energetic crowd at a concert. Each molecule bumps its neighbor, transmitting the energy of the original vibration outward in all directions. But air isn't the only substance sound can move through. In fact, it's not even the best. Sound can travel through any material that has particles close enough together to pass along the vibration. That includes gases like air, yes, but also liquids and solids. And here's where things get interesting. Because the denser the medium, the faster and more efficiently sound can travel. That might seem counterintuitive at first. You might think that a thick, heavy material would slow things down. But it turns out that having more particles packed closely together means that vibrations can pass more quickly from one to the next. The energy doesn't have to travel as far between collisions. Let's break it down with a simple comparison. In air at room temperature, sound travels at roughly 340 meters per second. That's fast enough to cross a football field in under a second. In water, though, sound zips along at about 1,500 meters per second, more than 4 times faster than in air. And in a solid like steel, try about 5,000 meters per second. That's over 15 times the speed of sound in air. It's like giving sound a high-speed train instead of a bicycle. This explains why, if you put your ear against a railroad track, you might hear an oncoming train before you hear it through the air. The vibrations are traveling through the solid steel rail much faster than they are through the surrounding atmosphere. It's also why marine animals like whales and dolphins use sound to communicate over vast distances underwater. The ocean is an excellent sound conductor, and low-frequency whale calls can travel for hundreds of kilometers through the deep sea. Of course, every medium has its quirks. Just because sound travels faster through solids doesn't always mean it sounds clearer. In fact, the clarity of sound, the way it retains its original qualities, can be affected by how much the medium absorbs or distorts the wave. For example, while a concrete wall is great at transmitting sound quickly, it's also very good at reflecting and scattering it, which can make the sound feel muddled or echoey. On the other hand, something like a soft blanket absorbs much of the sound energy, muffling it into near silence. Temperature plays a role too, especially in gases. Warmer air molecules move faster, which helps them transfer sound energy more efficiently. That means sound travels faster in warm air than in cold air. If you've ever noticed how distant sounds seem crisper or more distinct on a chilly morning, that's partly because the speed difference can cause sound waves to bend or refract in strange ways. Cold air near the ground can act like an acoustic lens, curving the path of sound downward so it reaches your ears more directly. Now let's imagine the other extreme, a place with no medium, a vacuum. Outer space is probably the most famous vacuum we know. It's not completely empty, but it's empty enough that sound, for all practical purposes, can't travel through it. That's why the epic space battles in movies filled with explosions, engine roars, and dramatic orchestral stabs are purely artistic license. If you were floating near a spaceship when it exploded, you'd see it happen, sure, but the silence would be absolute. No boom, no sizzle, no rising crescendo of danger. Just quiet, majestic nothingness. Perhaps a good moment to whisper. So much for Dolby Surround. Even in places where there is a medium, sound behaves differently depending on its properties. Let's take helium, for example. You've probably heard what happens when someone inhales helium and speaks. Their voice turns hilariously squeaky like a cartoon character on Fast Forward. What's going on there? Well, helium is much less dense than air, and the speed of sound in helium is significantly higher. When sound waves move faster, they affect the resonant frequencies of your vocal tract, emphasizing the higher harmonics of your voice. It doesn't actually make your vocal cords vibrate faster, it just changes the way your voice resonates. That's the science behind the giggles. There's a flip side too. If you breathe in a heavy gas like sulfur hexafluoride, which, for the record, should only be done under controlled, safe conditions, it has the opposite effect. Your voice drops to an absurdly low, Darth Vader-like rumble. That's because the denser gas slows down sound, altering the way it bounces around your vocal tract and bringing out the lower tones. It's all the same mechanics, just in different mediums. It's not just gases, liquids, and solids that shape the journey of sound. The structure of a material also plays a role. For example, a lattice of steel beams can carry vibrations in complex, sometimes unpredictable ways. A hollow wooden floor can become a drumhead for every footstep. A paper-thin wall in an apartment building can seem to amplify the sounds of your neighbor's TV at 2 a.m. Materials don't just conduct sound. They color it, reflect it, dampen it, and sometimes even amplify it. And while sound usually travels better in denser materials, there are exceptions and trade-offs. Take foam, for instance. It's technically a solid, but its spongy, porous structure is excellent at absorbing sound. That's why recording studios use foam panels. They're designed not to transmit sound efficiently, but to soak it up, keeping echoes and reverberations to a minimum. The same principle is used in anechoic chambers, rooms specifically built to be as close to soundless as possible. With no hard surfaces to bounce off and no resonance to amplify vibrations, sound in an anechoic chamber dies almost instantly. Some people find it peaceful, others find it deeply unsettling, like being inside a vacuum with ears. Our own bodies are also sound mediums. You can hear your own voice not just through the air but also through bone conduction. That's why your voice sounds different when you hear a recording of it. It's missing the part of the sound that normally travels through your skull. Your bones carry low-frequency vibrations directly to your inner ear, giving your voice a richer, deeper quality from your own perspective. Recordings, on the other hand, only capture the air-carried component, leaving you to wonder why you sound like a startled squirrel. This interplay between sound and medium is what makes the auditory world so rich. It's why your footsteps sound different on a gravel path versus a wooden deck. It's why voices echo in empty churches but get swallowed in carpeted hallways. It's why underwater recordings sound muffled and alien. Every material adds its own signature, its own twist on the wave. Like a fingerprint, the medium leaves an impression on every sound that passes through it. And just like a good friend, the right medium can make all the difference in helping sound get to where it's going. Whether it's a whisper drifting through air, a heartbeat traveling through a stethoscope, or a seismic tremor shaking its way through the rock, sound needs something to hold its hand. Otherwise, it's just potential, silent, motionless, waiting for something, anything, to vibrate. Picture a buzzing bee lazily weaving through a summer garden. Now picture the deep rumble of a distant thunderstorm rolling across the horizon. Both of these sounds are made from the same basic stuff, vibrations traveling through air, but they feel completely different. One is light, high-pitched, and kind of charming. The other is low, heavy, and carries the sort of authority that makes pets hide under furniture. The difference between the two? Frequency. Frequency is one of the most important characteristics of sound. It's the reason some noises make us perk up while others lull us to sleep. It determines pitch, the musical term for how high or low a sound is. And while the word frequency might bring back traumatic memories of math class, it's really just a count of how many times something happens in a second. Specifically, how many times a sound wave completes one full cycle, compression and rarefaction, in 1 second. We measure that in hertz. 1 hertz means 1 cycle per second. 10 hertz means 10 wobbles per second. 1,000 hertz? That's 1,000 tiny pressure waves squeezing through the air and into your ears every second. Your ears are fantastically tuned to pick up a wide range of these frequencies. Most humans can hear from about 20 hertz at the low end to around 20,000 hertz at the high end. That upper limit tends to decrease with age. By the time you reach your 30s or 40s, you may only hear up to 15,000 or 16,000 hertz. Teenagers, on the other hand, are walking around with high-frequency radar. This has led to the invention of some rather mischievous things like high-pitched ringtones only young people can hear, which they sometimes use in classrooms to avoid detection by teachers. Technology meets teenage rebellion. But back to the basics. Low-frequency sounds have long wavelengths and travel more slowly through your ear, creating those deep, resonant tones we associate with bass notes in music, distant engines, or the calming hum of a fan. High-frequency sounds have short wavelengths and zip through your auditory system, producing crisp, bright, and sometimes shrill tones. Think of birds chirping, whistles blowing, or fingernails on a chalkboard. What's fascinating is that frequency isn't just about how we hear, it's also about how we feel. Very low frequencies, known as infrasound, are below the threshold of human hearing, but they can still affect us. These are sounds under 20 hertz, too low for our ears to detect, but not necessarily too low for our bodies to sense. Some animals, like elephants and whales, use infrasound to communicate across great distances. These low-frequency rumbles can travel for dozens or even hundreds of kilometers through air or water. There's even some evidence that infrasound can produce odd effects in humans, feelings of unease, anxiety, or even awe, especially when the sound is present in environments like large cathedrals, haunted houses, or the quiet hum of massive engines. Some researchers have speculated that infrasound might explain certain ghost sightings or paranormal experiences, especially when those feelings of dread coincide with no visible cause. It's not a ghost, it's just physics. At the other end of the spectrum is ultrasound, frequencies above 20,000 hertz. These are sounds that are too high-pitched for us to hear, but not for other creatures. Bats, for example, are masters of ultrasound. They emit high-frequency chirps and use the echoes that bounce back from objects to map their surroundings, a process called echolocation. Dolphins use a similar trick underwater, and even some moths have evolved to detect bat ultrasound so they can perform evasive maneuvers. It's nature's version of radar and counter-radar, all happening silently beyond the reach of human ears. Ultrasound isn't just an animal superpower, it's also a powerful tool for humans. In medical imaging, ultrasound waves are used to peer inside the body without making a single incision. These high-frequency waves bounce off tissues, organs, and even unborn babies, producing real-time images that doctors can use to diagnose problems or monitor development. And because these waves are above our hearing range, the process is silent to the patient. No buzzing, no whirring, just the soft hum of science at work. Frequency also plays a crucial role in music. Every note you hear, whether it's from a piano, a violin, or a kazoo, corresponds to a specific frequency. The note A, above middle C for example, vibrates at 440 Hz. That's 440 cycles per second, a steady ripple of pressure waves reaching your ears. When musicians tune their instruments, they often use that note as a reference, because it's a universal standard across many musical systems. But pitch isn't determined by frequency alone. It also depends on how the sound interacts with your ears and brain. For instance, two instruments can play the same note at the same frequency, but they'll still sound different. A violin and a flute both playing an A will not be mistaken for one another. That's because of overtones, additional higher frequencies layered on top of the fundamental one. These overtones, or harmonics, give each instrument its unique voice, or timbre. It's like the difference between different fonts. The letters might be the same, but the style and flavour are completely different. Speaking of unique voices, human speech is an intricate dance of frequency control. Your vocal cords produce a basic frequency, which determines the pitch of your voice. But your mouth, tongue, and throat shape that sound into a complex bundle of frequencies called formants. These formants help distinguish between different vowels and consonants. That's how you can tell the difference between bat and bit. Even though the pitch of the speaker's voice might stay the same, it's a constant modulation of frequency, finely tuned by muscles we rarely think about. Musicians, and especially singers, learn to control these subtle shifts in frequency to express emotion, emphasize words, or simply hit that one particularly tricky note. In fact, your brain is so good at processing pitch that you can usually tell when someone's even slightly off-key. It doesn't take a musical education to cringe at a sour note. It's built into your biology. Your brain expects a certain pattern, and when something deviates, it throws up a little mental flag. That wasn't quite right. Frequency also influences how sound behaves in different environments. Low-frequency sounds tend to travel farther and are less likely to be absorbed by materials. That's why you can often hear the thump of a bass drum or the rumble of a subwoofer through walls and floors, even when higher-pitched parts of the music are muffled. High-frequency sounds, on the other hand, are more easily absorbed and scattered. They can be blocked by soft furnishings, curtains, and even your own body. That's why noise-cancelling headphones work particularly well on higher frequencies. They can actively generate the inverse sound wave to cancel out those sharp, intrusive noises. Interestingly, the way we perceive pitch can also depend on volume. A phenomenon known as the Fletcher-Munson curves shows that our ears are more sensitive to certain frequencies at certain volumes. At low volumes, we're less sensitive to very low and very high frequencies. That's why music played softly might sound dull or flat, while the same music played louder comes to life with richer bass and sparkling treble. Some audio systems even include a loudness button that boosts low and high frequencies at lower volumes to compensate for this natural quirk in our hearing. And let's not forget one of the more whimsical effects of frequency, the Doppler effect. You've probably experienced it when a car or ambulance zooms past you. As it approaches, the pitch of its engine or siren sounds higher, and as it moves away, the pitch suddenly drops. That change is caused by the motion of the sound source compressing or stretching the waves relative to your position. It's a moving demonstration, literally, of how frequency and motion are deeply connected. In the end, frequency is what gives sound its character. It's the difference between a mosquito's whine and a cello's growl, between a joyful whistle and a thunderous roar. It's woven into language, music, emotion, and nature. It shapes how we interpret the world and how the world speaks back to us. So whether it's a lullaby sung at bedtime, the purr of a cat nestled beside you, or the quiet hum of a distant machine, it all comes down to frequency. those invisible waves marching steadily through the air, bringing with them the pitch, pattern, and pulse of life itself. Imagine you're standing in an empty concert hall. You whisper a word, just one soft syllable, and it bounces gently off the walls, growing faint with each echo. Now imagine clapping your hands instead. The sharp, sudden crack fills the space instantly. Why does the clap feel so much louder than the whisper, even though both came from you and both used about the same amount of effort? The answer lies not in frequency or pitch, but in amplitude, the height of the sound wave, and how that translates into what we perceive as volume. In the simplest terms, amplitude is a measure of how big a sound wave is, not how long it is or how often it repeats, but how strong the pressure changes are as it travels through a medium. Think of a wave on the ocean. A tiny ripple barely disturbs the surface. A massive wave lifts entire boats. Same general shape, but very different energy. In sound, that energy is what gives volume to the wave. Low amplitude means a quiet sound. High amplitude means a loud one. It's the difference between a whisper and a scream, even if both are the same pitch. Sound waves, just like ocean waves, carry energy through space. When you turn up the volume on a speaker, you're not increasing the frequency or changing the pitch of the music. You're simply increasing the amplitude. The speaker cone pushes and pulls the air more forcefully, creating bigger pressure changes, and those stronger vibrations hit your eardrum with more intensity. Your brain interprets that as, wow, that's loud, and depending on the genre either reaches for the volume knob or starts an impromptu dance. We measure sound volume in units called decibels. The decibel scale is logarithmic, which is just a fancy way of saying it doesn't go up in nice, even steps. A sound at 60 decibels isn't twice as loud as one at 30, it's many times louder. In fact, every increase of 10 decibels represents a sound that's about twice as loud to our ears. So 70 decibels is twice as loud as 60, and 80 is twice as loud as 70. It's a sneaky little scale that quickly escalates from soft rustles to brain-rattling roars. For context, a whisper is usually around 30 decibels. Normal conversation falls somewhere between 50 and 60. A busy street or loud restaurant might clock in at 70. A rock concert or a jackhammer, easily over 100, and standing too close to a jet engine during takeoff. That's well above 120 decibels, the threshold of pain. At that point, you're not just hearing the sound, you're feeling it vibrate in your bones, like your skeleton is trying to join the rhythm section. Prolonged exposure to sounds above 85 decibels can actually cause hearing damage over time. That's why construction workers wear ear protection, and why audiologists recommend turning your headphones down to a reasonable level. If someone can hear your music from across the room while you're wearing earbuds, chances are your cochlea is quietly filing a complaint. Now, just because a sound is loud doesn't mean it's unpleasant. We enjoy loud music, cheering crowds, and the deep rumble of thunder. But volume also affects how we interpret emotion. A soft voice can be soothing, intimate, or even secretive. A loud voice might convey excitement, urgency, or anger. Filmmakers use this to great effect. Ever noticed how a horror movie gets really quiet right before something jumps out? That's intentional. It primes your ears and your nerves, making the sudden burst of sound feel even louder and scarier than it really is. But not all loudness is created equal. Our perception of volume is also influenced by frequency. Human ears are more sensitive to sounds in the middle range, particularly between 1000 and 5000 hertz, because that's where human speech usually lives. So a high-pitched chirp and a low-pitched rumble at the same decibel level might not sound equally loud. The chirp might feel more piercing, even though the actual energy of the sound is the same. This is why alarms and ringtones often use high-pitched tones. They cut through ambient noise and grab your attention, even if they're not especially loud. On the flip side, some low-frequency sounds can feel loud without sounding loud. Subwoofers produce deep bass tones that you feel more than hear. These sounds don't necessarily reach a painful volume, but they can shake windows, rattle furniture, and give you the impression that the entire room is pulsing. That's amplitude at work in a different sensory domain, turning sound into a full-body experience. Amplitude also plays a role in dynamics. the musical term for how sound levels change over time. A piece of music that stays at the same volume for 5 minutes might start to feel flat or repetitive. But when a song builds gradually from soft to loud, it creates tension and release, adding emotional depth. Think of a movie soundtrack that starts with a quiet piano melody, then swells into a thunderous orchestral climax. That journey, from gentle to grand, is largely a manipulation of amplitude. It's sound painting with pressure. Some musicians and sound engineers take this to an artistic extreme. In modern music production, a technique known as compression is used to reduce the dynamic range, the difference between the quietest and loudest parts of a track. This makes the song sound more consistent in volume and helps it stand out in noisy environments, like a car or a busy coffee shop. But if you overdo it, you can flatten the emotional impact, turning a once powerful performance into an auditory pancake. On the other end of the spectrum, you have ASMR, Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. These videos are famous for their whispering, tapping, and soft crinkling sounds, all designed to create a tingling sensation in the listener. Here, low amplitude is the star. The sounds are delicate, intimate, and often recorded with high sensitivity microphones to capture every little nuance. It's audio minimalism, and for some people, it's deeply relaxing. There's also something charming about how our brains adjust to different volumes without us even noticing. Ever walked into a noisy room and felt overwhelmed, only to find it fades into the background after a few minutes? That's your auditory system adapting. It's constantly recalibrating, filtering out steady background noise so you can focus on more important changes in your environment. Like someone calling your name or the sound of your phone ringing, it's a survival skill, a mental volume knob that helps you make sense of the acoustic chaos. And sometimes volume isn't about amplitude at all. Sometimes it's about contrast. A tiny sound in a silent room can feel enormous. A single footstep in a quiet hallway can send chills down your spine. The absence of sound can make the next sound feel louder than it actually is. That's why silence is such a powerful tool in music, film, and storytelling. It gives the loud moments something to stand against. Without silence, loudness has no meaning. In a world that often feels noisy, it's easy to overlook the role of volume in shaping our experience. But it's there, woven into everything we hear. The way your name sounds when spoken softly by someone you love. The boom of fireworks echoing in your chest. The quiet tick of a clock in the middle of the night. All of it is amplitude, sound's secret ingredient for grabbing attention, stirring emotion, and reminding us that even invisible forces can have real weight. So the next time you turn down the volume to whisper a secret or crank it up to blast your favorite song, remember that you're not just changing how loud something is, you're shaping how it feels, how it's perceived, and how it's remembered. Volume isn't just a dial, it's a doorway into the emotional power of sound. There's something almost magical about resonance. It's one of those phenomena that sounds a little too poetic to be real, like the idea that two objects can fall into sync simply because they're vibrating at the same frequency. But resonance isn't just science wrapped in a Shakespearean metaphor. It's a very real, very powerful feature of how sound works in the world. And once you start noticing it, you'll see it everywhere, humming quietly behind the curtain of daily life. At its core, resonance is all about amplification through alignment. Imagine pushing someone on a swing. If you give them a shove at just the right moment, in sync with their natural rhythm, they'll swing higher and higher with very little effort from you. But if you push out of sync, say just as they're swinging back toward you, you're more likely to stop the motion than help it along. That's resonance in a nutshell. When an external force matches the natural frequency of an object, the vibrations add up. And when they don't match, the whole thing just kind of fizzles out. In sound, this can lead to some spectacular effects. Take a tuning fork, for example. Tap it gently, and it vibrates at a specific frequency. Now place it near another tuning fork with the same natural frequency, without touching it, and watch what happens. The second fork starts to vibrate too, just from the sound waves traveling through the air. They're in sync. They're resonating. It's like two strangers humming the same tune across a room and somehow finding harmony. This principle isn't limited to metal forks and physics demonstrations. It's embedded into the design of musical instruments. When you pluck a guitar string, The vibration alone isn't loud enough to fill a room, but the body of the guitar, its hollow wooden shape, is designed to resonate with the string's frequency, amplifying the sound. That's why electric guitars need amplifiers, but acoustic guitars can serenade a campfire without assistance. The body of the guitar isn't just decorative, it's a carefully crafted resonance chamber. Wind instruments follow the same logic. When you blow into a flute or a clarinet, you're not just pushing air, you're creating pressure waves that bounce around inside the instrument's tube. Certain lengths of air column resonate more effectively than others, which is why pressing different keys or covering holes changes the pitch. You're altering the length of the vibrating air column, nudging it toward new resonant frequencies. The air inside the instrument hums along, and the resulting sound is strong and clear. Even buildings and bridges are susceptible to resonance, though in those cases it can be less musical and more catastrophic. One of the most famous examples is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington state, which dramatically collapsed in 1940 due to wind-induced resonance. The bridge started to oscillate in response to wind at just the right frequency, and the motion built up until the entire structure twisted and buckled like a ribbon in slow motion. Fortunately, no human lives were lost, though one unfortunate dog was reportedly trapped in a car during the collapse. Still, it was a powerful reminder that resonance isn't just a curious quirk, it can be a force to be reckoned with. On a smaller, more musical scale, think about a wine glass. With the right amount of skill and a slightly dramatic flair, you can run a damp finger around the rim of a glass and cause it to sing. That high-pitched tone is the result of the glass resonating at its natural frequency. The friction from your finger excites the vibration, and if you hit the sweet spot just right, the sound will emerge and grow louder. Some singers can even shatter glass by singing the correct note loudly enough. The key is to match the resonant frequency of the glass and sustain the vibration until the amplitude builds to the breaking point. It's less about volume and more about persistence and precision. The human voice, as it turns out, is a marvel of resonant engineering. When we speak or sing, the vocal cords in our larynx vibrate to produce sound, but that sound is just the beginning. The real shaping and amplification happens in our resonating cavities, our throat, mouth, and nasal passages. These spaces selectively enhance certain frequencies and dampen others, which gives each person their unique vocal quality. Singers learn to adjust the shape of their mouth and the position of their tongue to maximize resonance, making their voice fuller and more powerful without necessarily getting louder. It's part acoustics, part biology, and part magic. Resonance also shows up in unexpected places. Ever been driving down the highway when a particular speed makes something in the car start to hum or rattle? That's resonance. A loose dashboard panel or cup holder reaches its natural frequency thanks to the vibrations from the engine or the road, and suddenly your peaceful drive is accompanied by the nasal whine of a vibrating cup. Slightly annoying, yes, but also kind of impressive. Your car is accidentally performing a science experiment. In architecture, careful attention is paid to acoustic resonance, especially in places like concert halls, auditoriums, and churches. The shape and materials of the space determine how sound waves reflect and interact, and certain architectural choices can either enhance or ruin the listening experience. That's why some rooms feel like they sing when you speak inside them, while others swallow your words like a black hole. Resonance is what gives a space its voice, and it's not just large spaces that resonate. Even everyday objects carry their own natural frequencies. Tap a table, a mug, or a metal railing, and you'll hear a distinct tone. That tone is the object's resonant response to being disturbed. Some materials resonate clearly and beautifully, like crystal or certain metals, while others, like foam or fabric, tend to dampen vibrations quickly. That's why draped curtains can reduce echoes and why recording studios are lined with oddly shaped foam tiles. They're not just for decoration, they're carefully arranged to prevent unwanted resonance and reflections that could interfere with recordings. In electronic systems, resonance also plays a key role. Radio tuners, for instance, work by finding the resonant frequency of a circuit that matches a specific radio signal. When the incoming radio wave matches the natural frequency of the receiver's components, the signal is amplified and heard clearly. Without resonance, tuning into your favorite station would be a much fuzzier, less enjoyable experience. Nature gets in on the resonance game too. Some insects use body parts as resonating structures to amplify their calls. Cicadas, for example, have special organs called tymbals that produce sound when flexed. Their hollow abdominal cavities act as resonance chambers, magnifying the buzz until it echoes through summer evenings like a tiny chainsaw in the trees. Birds do something similar with their vocal sacs and airways. Even the humble frog gets in on the act, inflating its throat pouch to create a resonant chamber for croaks that can travel across ponds and marshes. Resonance is also at work in your favourite pair of noise-cancelling headphones, though in a more indirect way. While they primarily use destructive interference to cancel out sound, their effectiveness is influenced by the resonant properties of the headphone materials and the ear cups. If the internal components resonate at the wrong frequencies, they can actually amplify the very sounds you're trying to block out. That's why high-quality noise-cancelling headphones are engineered so precisely. They're not just absorbing sound, they're managing their own internal resonance as well. Perhaps one of the most fascinating and intimate examples of resonance is how it plays into emotional response. Think of a particular piece of music that gives you chills. It's not just the melody or the lyrics, it's how the frequencies of the notes align with your body and brain, how certain harmonies create resonant patterns that feel deeply satisfying. There's a reason some musical intervals are described as consonant. They resonate well with each other, creating a sense of stability and beauty. Dissonant intervals, by contrast, clash more aggressively, which can evoke tension or discomfort. Music at its heart is a game of resonance and release. So what is resonance really? It's the universe's way of saying, I hear you. It's when two things, objects, frequencies, ideas, find common ground and build each other up. It's a soft whisper growing into a shout, a subtle vibration becoming a powerful force, and while it may be grounded in physics, it echoes through music, architecture, technology, and biology alike. Resonance reminds us that sometimes the most powerful results come not from fighting the natural rhythm of things, but from aligning with it. When the timing is right, when the frequencies match, and when the conditions allow, the quietest vibration can turn into a symphony. Hearing seems effortless. You open your eyes and see. You open your ears, well, metaphorically speaking, and sound just pours in. Conversations, music, birdsong, traffic, laughter, thunder, the ticking of a clock you didn't notice until everything else went quiet. It all flows in so smoothly, so automatically, that it's easy to forget how much work your body is doing behind the scenes. Because hearing isn't just about ears, it's a full-body relay system with a starring role for your brain. Let's start with the basics. Your ear is essentially a biological microphone. It takes in vibrations, pressure waves in the air, and translates them into something your brain can understand. But this microphone is a bit more elaborate than anything you'll find at a karaoke bar. It has multiple components, each playing a crucial role in capturing, amplifying, and interpreting sound. The journey begins with the outer ear, or pinna. That's the part you can see, the bit that sticks out from your head, and depending on the day, either helps you hear or holds up your sunglasses. The pinna isn't just decorative. Its unique shape actually helps funnel sound waves into the ear canal, especially those coming from in front of you. It's also subtly asymmetric, which allows you to localize sound, meaning to tell whether something's above or below you, or slightly off to the side. Your brain picks up on the way sounds bounce around the folds of your outer ear and uses that information to map out your auditory surroundings. From the pinna, sound travels down the ear canal and eventually strikes the eardrum, or tympanic membrane. This paper-thin sheet of tissue is stretched tight and sensitive. When sound waves hit it, it begins to vibrate. These vibrations are incredibly tiny, just a few billionths of a meter, but they carry the full shape and rhythm of the original sound wave. Now here's where things get clever. Directly behind the eardrum are the tiniest bones in the human body, known collectively as the ossicles. There are 3 of them: the malleus, which means hammer, the incus, anvil, and the stapes, stirrup. Yes, your inner ear is basically a medieval blacksmith's toolkit, just miniaturized and highly specialized. The eardrum's vibrations are passed to the malleus, which rocks back and forth and moves the incus, which in turn wiggles the stapes. This mechanical chain dramatically amplifies the vibrations up to 20 times stronger than what arrived at the eardrum, before passing them into the next chamber of the ear, the cochlea. The cochlea is where the magic really happens. It's a spiral-shaped structure about the size of a garden snail, filled with fluid and lined with thousands of tiny hair cells. These cells are the unsung heroes of hearing. As the stapes pushes against a small membrane at the base of the cochlea called the oval window, it sends pressure waves rippling through the cochlear fluid. These waves travel along the spiral, and depending on their frequency, they peak at different points along its length. High-frequency sounds peak near the base, where the membrane is stiff and narrow. Low-frequency sounds travel further into the cochlea, peaking near the apex, where the membrane is wider and more flexible. This elegant system is known as tonotopic organization. It's like having a tiny piano keyboard curled up inside your head, with each part of the cochlea tuned to a specific note. Now, back to those hair cells. Each one has bundles of microscopic hairs on top, called stereocilia. As the pressure waves move through the cochlear fluid, they cause these hairs to bend. This bending opens tiny ion channels in the cell's membranes, triggering electrical signals that are sent via the auditory nerve to the brain. And then, voila, sound is born, not in the ear but in the brain. But hearing doesn't stop at detection. Your brain isn't just a passive receiver of signals, it's an active interpreter. The auditory cortex, located in the temporal lobe of your brain, takes these raw signals and turns them into meaningful experiences. It distinguishes between music and speech, alerts you to the sound of your name in a crowded room, and helps you tell the difference between the rustling of leaves and the hiss of a leaky radiator. The brain even predicts what you're likely to hear next, filling in gaps and making corrections when things don't sound quite right. That's why you can often understand someone even if a word or two is lost in a noisy room. Your brain is constantly piecing together context, using past experience and linguistic patterns to make sense of the auditory world. And it gets even better. Your brain also pays attention to importance. If you're reading a book in a cafe, surrounded by clinking cups and murmuring conversations, your auditory system can dial down the background noise and focus on the sound of someone calling your name. This ability to hone in on a single voice in a sea of chatter is sometimes called the cocktail party effect, and it's one of the marvels of human auditory processing. Then there's spatial awareness. Your brain uses differences in the timing and intensity of sounds reaching each ear to triangulate their source. If a sound hits your right ear a fraction of a second before your left, your brain deduces that the source is to your right. If it's louder in one ear than the other, that's another clue. Combine these with the unique shape of your outer ear and the acoustics of your environment, and your brain creates a three-dimensional audio map of your surroundings. That's how you know whether someone is whispering behind you or a car is approaching from the left. It's an incredibly fast, complex process, and you do it all without thinking. Every moment of every day, your ears and brain are engaged in a detailed conversation about the world around you, passing it into useful information. That bird is up in the tree, that engine is slowing down, that voice is coming from behind the door. Interestingly, hearing also has an emotional component. The limbic system, which is involved in emotion and memory, is closely connected to the auditory system. That's why music can make you cry, or why a particular sound, like the jingle of an old ringtone, can suddenly transport you back to a very specific moment in time. Sounds can be deeply evocative, stirring emotions in ways that are hard to explain but impossible to ignore. Even silence plays a role in this dance. The absence of sound or a sudden drop in volume can grab your attention just as effectively as a loud noise. It's your brain's way of saying, something changed, pay attention. That's why a sudden quiet in a forest can be unnerving, or why the pause before a punchline makes the joke land harder. Your ears are always on duty, always gathering data, even when you think you're not listening. And yes, your ears keep working while you sleep. Though your brain dampens most sensory input to help you rest, certain sounds, like a baby crying or a smoke alarm, can still trigger a response. Some parts of your auditory system remain active, filtering for danger or relevance, even as you drift into dreams. It's one of the reasons why sound is such an effective way to wake someone gently, or to help them fall asleep. But your auditory system isn't invincible. Prolonged exposure to loud noises can damage those delicate hair cells in the cochlea, and once they're gone, they don't regenerate. Hearing loss can also result from problems in the middle ear, like infections or damage to the ossicles, or from issues with the auditory nerve itself. That's why hearing protection is so important in loud environments, and why regular hearing checkups are a good idea as we age. Thankfully, modern technology has made enormous strides in supporting hearing. Hearing aids amplify specific frequencies and help compensate for damaged hair cells. Cochlear implants, for those with severe hearing loss, can bypass the damaged parts of the ear entirely and send signals directly to the auditory nerve. These technologies don't replicate natural hearing perfectly, but they can restore a profound sense of connection to the world. And let's not forget the brain's adaptability. Known as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and adapt means that even people with hearing loss can develop new ways to process sound, especially with training and practice. The brain is always learning, always rewiring itself to make the best use of the information it receives. So next time you hear something, anything, from a whispered hello to the rustle of wind in the trees, pause for a moment and think about what's actually happening. Tiny pressure waves, traveling invisibly through the air, reach the folds of your outer ear. They pass through a chain of miniature bones, stir the fluid in a spiral-shaped chamber, tickle microscopic hair cells, and finally trigger a cascade of electrical impulses that your brain interprets as a sound, a voice, a melody, a memory. Hearing may seem simple, but beneath the surface, it's one of the most intricate, delicate, and astonishing systems in your body. It connects you to others, warns you of danger, calms you with lullabies, startles you with thunder, and carries words, stories, and emotions straight into the center of your mind. You don't just hear the world, you resonate with it, and somewhere inside your head, a tiny, watery snail is conducting a symphony that only you can hear. Silence, a concept so simple, yet so slippery. At first glance, silence seems easy to define. It's the absence of sound, right? Just a big, echoing nothing. But the deeper you listen, the more complicated it becomes. Silence, it turns out, is rarely absolute, and often the more we chase it, the more we realize it doesn't quite exist in the way we imagine. Start by closing your eyes and trying to find silence, real silence. Not just a break in conversation or the quiet of a room, but total pure auditory stillness. It's tricky, isn't it? Even in the quietest moments, there's usually something. Air moving through vents, the low hum of electronics, the distant drone of traffic, or maybe the gentle rustle of fabric as you shift your weight. Even in the dead of night, the world is rarely still. But what if you found a place where all those background sounds were removed? That's the idea behind anechoic chambers, specialized rooms designed to absorb every reflection of sound. The walls, floor, and ceiling are lined with wedges of foam or fiberglass that soak up sound waves instead of bouncing them back. There's no echo, no reverberation, nothing coming back to your ears. Step into one of these rooms, and suddenly you're left only with the sounds of your own body, your breathing, your heartbeat. Some people report hearing the faint gurgle of digestion, or even the subtle clicking of joints as they shift. In a truly silent space, your internal symphony becomes uncomfortably loud. Anechoic chambers are often used for scientific testing, measuring the precise sound output of a speaker, or studying how sound behaves without interference. But they're also a little unsettling. Spend a few minutes inside and many people begin to feel disoriented. Without the familiar echoes and ambient noise that help orient us in space, the brain gets a little confused. Some people report a feeling of pressure in their ears, even though there's no actual change in air pressure. Others describe a sense of floating, or an odd awareness of their own body in a way they've never quite experienced before. Silence, it seems, can be surprisingly noisy. That's because our brains are wired to expect sound. From birth, we're immersed in it. Sound tells us where we are, what's happening around us, and who might be calling our name. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment for auditory input, even when we're not consciously paying attention. And when the input drops too low, the brain sometimes invents something to fill the gap. This brings us to the curious phenomenon of phantom sounds, those odd little tones, hums, or beeps you sometimes think you hear, especially in very quiet places. Many people experience what's known as temporary tinnitus after being in a silent environment. It's the perception of sound when none exists, often a high-pitched ringing or faint buzzing. Scientists believe it may be caused by the brain turning up its internal gain in the absence of external sound, much like a microphone amplifying a signal when it can't detect anything clearly. With nothing coming in from the ears, the auditory system goes looking for something, anything, and starts picking up internal noise. This isn't just a modern issue either. Ancient philosophers and mystics often wrote about the experience of silence as something profound, even eerie. In monasteries and temples, silence was cultivated as a form of discipline, not because the absence of sound was easy, but because it revealed a deeper layer of consciousness. The lack of external noise made room for internal awareness. For many, silence wasn't just about peace. It was a kind of confrontation with thoughts, emotions, and sensations that usually get drowned out in the hustle of daily life. And yet, from a purely physical perspective, true silence is almost impossible to achieve. Sound is vibration, and vibrations are everywhere. Atoms move, molecules jostle, air shifts. On Earth, even if you managed to eliminate every external sound, your own body would still be a noisy place. And if you tried to escape that by stepping into outer space, you'd run into a different kind of silence, one that's not just eerie, but absolute. In space, there is no air, no fluid medium to carry sound waves. That means sound, as we know it, can't travel. You could crash cymbals together with all your strength on the moon, and unless someone was touching them or close enough to feel the vibration through their suit, they wouldn't hear a thing. Explosions, collisions, even shouting, they all vanish into silence in the vacuum. That's why, despite what you've seen in movies, space battles would be eerily quiet affairs. Lasers flashing, ships exploding, debris flying, but not a single boom. And yet, even the vacuum of space isn't totally quiet in a broader sense. While sound waves can't travel through space, other kinds of waves can, like electromagnetic waves. Radio waves, for example, are constantly zipping around the cosmos. In fact, much of what we hear from space, such as the eerie whooshes and chirps recorded by scientific instruments, isn't actually sound at all. It's data converted into audio so we can perceive it. The universe is filled with waves, but most of them just aren't the kind our ears were built for. Back on Earth, silence is often thought of as a luxury. We seek it out in quiet forests, remote beaches, or simply by closing a door and turning off our devices. But even these moments are filled with subtle sound. Wind moving through leaves, distant bird calls, the soft creak of a tree trunk. These aren't disruptions to silence, they are the silence. What we call quiet is usually just a gentle, natural soundscape. A break from the mechanical clamour of engines and electronics perhaps, but not the absence of sound. In fact, silence is often more about contrast than absence. A quiet moment feels quiet because it follows a noisy one. That pause in a song, the hush before a speech, the breath before a confession. Those moments feel powerful not because they contain nothing, but because of what they don't contain. Our brains interpret them as meaningful. A moment of silence can convey respect, tension, anticipation, or even grief. It's not just the lack of noise, it's a signal in itself. This emotional weight is why we hold minutes of silence for remembrance, why we pause in reverence, why films and music often rely on silence just as much as they rely on sound. Used well, silence can be louder than a shout. It demands attention, it invites reflection, it creates space for meaning. And then there's the silence we carry with us, subjective silence. The kind that varies from person to person. Someone who has lost hearing in one ear might still experience their world as full of sound, while another person with perfect hearing might describe a peaceful forest as silent. Our perception of silence is coloured by experience, expectation, and attention. The same space that seems blissfully quiet to one person might feel oppressively empty to another. It's a reminder that silence, like sound, lives not just in the world but in the mind. It's shaped by context, filtered through emotion, and deeply personal. And while we often treat it as the opposite of noise, the truth is more subtle. Silence is not the absence of life. It's the backdrop that allows us to hear it. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet place, take a moment to listen. Not for what's missing, but for what's still there. The low, steady hum of your surroundings, the rhythm of your breath, the distant traces of life continuing gently, steadily in the background. That's not silence being interrupted. That's silence. Alive. In the end, silence isn't nothing. It's everything you hear when the world stops shouting, and sometimes it says the most. Let's talk about space. Not personal space, although that's important too, especially when someone decides to have a loud phone call in the quiet carriage of a train. No, this is the big kind of space. The vast, cold, mostly empty expanse that surrounds our planet and makes up the overwhelming majority of the universe. You know, that place where all the stars live. Now here's a classic question. Can sound travel through space? If you've ever watched a science fiction movie, you might think the answer is yes. Explosions boom, lasers zap, engines roar, and ships whir through the vacuum with all the acoustic flair of a Hollywood car chase. But while it makes for great cinema, the reality is far quieter, eerily, completely quiet. Space, quite literally, doesn't have the right ingredients for sound. Remember, sound is a mechanical wave. It needs a medium, a physical substance to move through. On Earth, that medium is usually air. Vibrations from a sound source travel by jostling the molecules of air, which bump into their neighbors, and those neighbors pass on the motion, and so on, until the wave reaches your ears. But in space, there is no air. There are hardly any molecules at all. It's not a total vacuum, but it's close enough that molecules are so few and far between they can't carry a vibration effectively. No molecules, no jostling, no sound. That's the hard truth of cosmic acoustics. So when a spaceship explodes in deep space, there's no accompanying kaboom. The debris flies silently, flames flicker without a sound, and the only thing your astronaut might hear, if they're close enough, is the vibration of the explosion carried through their own ship's hull. But to experience that, they'd need to be physically connected to the object making the noise. It's like pressing your ear to a train track and hearing the distant rumble of a locomotive. The sound isn't in the air, it's in the material. This might feel a little disappointing at first. Space should be dramatic. Shouldn't an exploding star make some noise? Shouldn't a meteor crashing into a moon at 20 kilometers per second come with a serious audio punch? In reality, these events are totally silent, at least to human ears floating nearby. But silence doesn't mean inactivity. Just because we can't hear space doesn't mean it's quiet in every sense. Space is full of waves, just not sound waves. There are electromagnetic waves, like light, radio waves, X-rays, and gamma rays. These waves don't need a medium to travel through, which is how we can see stars from billions of light years away, and how spacecraft can send back data from the edge of the solar system. Scientists have gotten creative with these signals by converting data from telescopes into sound, an approach known as sonification. They can transform the otherwise silent cosmos into audio we can perceive. For example, radio waves from distant galaxies can be captured and translated into whooshing sounds, pops, or hums. The rhythmic pulses from a pulsar can be rendered as metronomic beats. Even the solar wind, streams of charged particles flowing from the sun, can be turned into eerie, fluctuating tones when translated into an audible format. It's not sound in the traditional sense, but it gives us a way to hear space through the lens of science. One famous example is the sounds recorded by the Voyager spacecraft. These aren't actual microphone recordings. They're electromagnetic fluctuations detected by instruments on board. When those fluctuations are converted into audio frequencies, they produce strange, otherworldly noises, high-pitched whistles, deep rumbles, and haunting static. It's the soundtrack of charged particles and magnetic fields interacting in the void. Another excellent case is the black hole in the Perseus galaxy cluster. In 2003, NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory detected ripples in the gas surrounding this black hole. Ripples that correspond to a frequency roughly 57 octaves below middle C. Far too low for humans to hear, but definitely a real, physical wave moving through gas. Recently, scientists shifted those waves into the audible range, creating a sound file that went viral on the internet. It sounded like a ghost humming in a cathedral. Creepy? Absolutely. But also a reminder that space does contain pressure waves in certain environments, just not in the kind of vacuum we normally associate with deep space. It's important to note that while most of space is nearly empty, not all regions are created equal. Some parts of the universe, like nebulae or the dense gas clouds around stars, have enough particles to allow sound-like waves to travel. In these places, pressure waves do exist, but they're vastly different from the sound waves we know. For one, they travel incredibly slowly. In the dense atmosphere of Earth, sound moves at about 340 meters per second. In interstellar gas clouds, where the density is unimaginably low, pressure waves might travel at less than a meter per second. That means a wave could take thousands or even millions of years to move across a single light year. If you thought buffering was bad on Earth, try waiting for a sound to reach you from across a nebula. Now let's talk about movies for a moment. Science fiction filmmakers know space is silent. Most of them do, anyway. But total silence can be jarring to viewers. Our brains are trained to associate visual action with audio impact. A silent explosion feels anticlimactic, so film composers and sound designers get creative. They use sound to represent a character's experience inside a spacecraft, vibrations transmitted through the structure, the hiss of systems, the muted bang of tools colliding. Or they use music and abstract soundscapes to stand in for what the scene feels like emotionally, not what it would actually sound like. It's not accurate, but it's effective storytelling. Occasionally you get a film that leans into the realism. The movie 2001: A Space Odyssey famously features long scenes of utter silence during space sequences, emphasizing the eerie vastness and isolating effect of space travel. More recently, the film Gravity tried to blend scientific accuracy with cinematic flair, removing sound from external events while letting us hear what the character inside the suit would experience. It's a compromise, and an elegant one, because while space may be quiet, your spacesuit is not. Inside, you'd hear the thrum of pumps, the gentle whoosh of air recycling systems, and perhaps your own breathing. A self-contained pocket of noise wrapped in the endless silence of the void. There's also a curious psychological effect to consider. Humans are not used to true silence. We live in a constant sea of sound, from the moment we wake up to the time we drift off to sleep, and even while we dream. Space, by contrast, is indifferent to all that. It doesn't care about your need for sonic feedback. It is silent not because it's trying to be poetic, but because it lacks the physical infrastructure to do anything else, and that silence can be unsettling. Astronauts often talk about how quiet space is, not the silence of being in space itself because they're inside a noisy spacecraft, but the realization that outside there is nothing. No wind, no birds, no rustling leaves, just the cold, airless black. Even the smallest knock or tap inside the ship reminds them that they're surrounded by an environment that doesn't transmit sound. If something were to happen to their communication system, their voice would carry no farther than the inside of their helmet. It's a humbling reminder of how much we rely on sound to feel connected, and how quickly its absence can make the universe feel very, very large. But in a way, the silence of space is also a gift. It means that when we do detect a wave, whether it's a radio signal from a distant galaxy, a burst of X-rays from a collapsing star, or a gravitational ripple from merging black holes, we can listen to it with the tools of science and creativity. We can translate it into something meaningful, something audible, something human. So no, sound does not travel through space in the way you might expect. There are no booms, no rumbles, no epic orchestral crashes, but that doesn't mean space is silent in every sense. It's full of energy, full of movement and full of stories waiting to be heard, just not with our ears alone. Sometimes you have to listen differently. You have to let the universe whisper through numbers and data and frequencies far beyond human hearing. And when you do, you find that even in the quietest places, the cosmos still has a lot to say. There's something undeniably exciting about breaking the rules of nature, at least the ones we thought were set in stone. One such rule for most of history was that nothing could move faster than sound. Then came the 20th century, and with it, the irresistible urge to go faster, higher, louder. Humanity began reaching for the skies, and before long, we discovered something strange happens when you push past the speed of sound. It doesn't just get faster, it gets loud, really loud. Enter the sonic boom. To understand the boom, you first need to understand what it means to travel at the speed of sound. Sound, as we know, is a pressure wave moving through a medium like air. At sea level, in dry air at about 20 degrees Celsius, that speed is roughly 340 meters per second, or around 1,230 kilometers per hour. That's fast, faster than most bullets, and definitely faster than your average car, bicycle, or ambitious squirrel. When an object travels through air, it creates pressure waves in front of it, a bit like the ripples in a pond created by a moving boat. At slower speeds, these ripples spread out in all directions. The sound waves get out ahead of the object, warning the air ahead that something is coming. But as the object moves faster and faster, it starts to catch up with its own pressure waves. When it reaches the speed of sound, it's moving just as fast as the waves it's creating. Those ripples begin to bunch up, and once the object goes faster than the speed of sound, breaking what's known as the sound barrier, it outruns those waves entirely, leaving a compressed shock wave in its wake. That shock wave is the sonic boom. It's not a one-time bang, as it's often imagined. It's more like a continuous cone of high-pressure air trailing behind a supersonic object. When that cone passes over you, you hear a sudden explosive sound. It's a sharp, thunder-like crack that can rattle windows and startle entire flocks of birds. Depending on your location and the altitude of the object, you might hear a single boom, a double boom, or even a rolling thunder-like rumble. But the physics behind it is the same. The object is outrunning its own sound. The concept of breaking the sound barrier was once thought to be impossible, or at least extremely dangerous. Early aircraft attempting high-speed flight encountered strange and sometimes deadly problems as they approached the speed of sound. Controls would become unresponsive, turbulence would increase, and in some cases the plane would begin to shake violently, a phenomenon known as buffeting. Engineers and pilots referred to this mysterious boundary as the wall, and for a time it seemed like a true physical limit. That changed on October 14th, 1947, when a Bell X-1 rocket plane named Glamorous Glennis, piloted by US Air Force Captain Chuck Yeager, became the first manned aircraft to officially break the sound barrier in level flight. The plane was shaped like a bullet and dropped from a larger aircraft before igniting its rocket engine and soaring past Mach 1, the speed of sound. The boom echoed over the desert, and the myth of the unbreakable wall was shattered. From that moment on, engineers began designing aircraft capable of sustained supersonic flight. The term Mach is used to describe speeds relative to the speed of sound. Mach 1 is the speed of sound. Mach 2 is twice that speed, and so on. Fighter jets like the F-15 and the Concorde passenger airliner were among the few aircraft to routinely cruise at Mach 2 or beyond. But going supersonic isn't just a matter of flooring the gas pedal. It comes with a host of aerodynamic challenges. Air doesn't behave the same way at supersonic speeds. Shock waves form around the aircraft, creating abrupt changes in pressure and temperature. These shock waves must be carefully managed to avoid instability or structural damage. The shape of the aircraft becomes critically important. Sleek, tapered noses, swept-back wings, and smooth surfaces help minimize drag and control airflow. Then there's the issue of noise. Sonic booms are more than just loud, they can be disruptive. Windows can crack, animals can be startled, and communities under flight paths can be disturbed. That's why, in most countries, supersonic flight over land is heavily restricted or outright banned. except for military operations or special testing. Commercial supersonic flights like those of the Concorde were limited to going supersonic only over oceans to avoid disturbing people on the ground. The Concorde itself deserves a moment in the spotlight. Introduced in the 1970s, this elegant needle-nosed aircraft could carry passengers at over twice the speed of sound, cruising at around Mach 2 and cutting transatlantic flight times in half. A trip from London to New York took just over 3 hours. Passengers were treated to champagne, white tablecloth service, and views of the curvature of the Earth from cruising altitudes above 60,000 feet. It was fast, luxurious, and undeniably cool, but it was also loud, expensive, and thirsty. This sonic boom limited its routes. The tickets were priced for the wealthy, and it burned fuel at an alarming rate. After decades of service, the Concorde was retired in 2003, and since then, no commercial supersonic passenger plane has taken its place. But engineers and companies around the world are working on new designs, quieter, more efficient supersonic jets that might one day make high-speed travel more accessible and less intrusive. Sonic booms themselves are being studied and redesigned. One of the major goals is to reduce their impact, literally. NASA's X-59 QuiSST, a sleek experimental aircraft, is designed to fly at supersonic speeds while producing a low boom signature, a sound more like a thump than a boom. By shaping the aircraft to minimize the pressure difference across the shockwave, engineers hope to make supersonic flight over land viable again. If successful, the X-59 could open the door to a new era of fast, quiet air travel. But supersonic isn't the end of the line. Beyond it lies the realm of hypersonic speeds, Mach 5 and above. At these velocities, air behaves even more strangely. The heat generated by compression and friction becomes extreme, requiring advanced materials and thermal protection systems. Hypersonic missiles and research vehicles are being tested, but for now, sustained hypersonic travel remains one of the great challenges in aerospace engineering. The physics of supersonic travel also teaches us about the limits of wave behavior. As an object exceeds the speed of sound, it compresses the air in front of it faster than the air can get out of the way. That creates a sudden spike in pressure, a shock wave, that travels outward and downward in a cone shape. The wider the object or the lower the altitude, the more intense the boom. The geometry of the shock wave means that a sonic boom isn't heard directly under the aircraft, but rather along a path called the boom carpet, an area miles wide where the shock wave reaches the ground. Interestingly, if you're traveling with the aircraft, you don't hear the boom yourself. The plane is ahead of its own sound, and the pressure wave trails behind. It's everyone else on the ground who gets the surprise. There are even natural versions of sonic booms. Meteorites entering Earth's atmosphere at hypersonic speeds can generate shock waves that produce loud explosions. The Chelyabinsk meteor in 2013 created a massive shock wave that shattered windows and caused injuries in Russia. And lightning, in a sense, creates a kind of sonic boom too. The rapid expansion of superheated air causes the cracking sound of thunder. It's not caused by an object moving faster than sound, but it's still a result of abrupt pressure changes creating a shockwave. So the next time you hear a distant window-rattling boom from the sky, know that you're witnessing the audible signature of something outrunning its own sound. A moment when motion meets resistance and punches through, leaving a ripple in the atmosphere. Breaking the sound barrier isn't just a technical milestone, it's a reminder that sound has a speed, and that speed can be beaten. It's a doorway into a world where air behaves like liquid, where waves become walls, and where the sky can suddenly crack open with the sharp punctuation of progress. The sonic boom is more than just a noise, it's the sound of possibility breaking free. The world is filled with chatter, but not all of it comes from humans. In fact, the animal kingdom might just be hosting the greatest sound show on Earth, and most of us are missing it. Birds serenade the dawn, whales sing to each other across oceans, and insects rub legs together in the world's tiniest percussion ensembles. Whether it's for courtship, warning, navigation, or just good old-fashioned gossip, animals use sound in ways that are as diverse and inventive as any human band or broadcast. Let's start with the virtuosos of the animal world, Songbirds. These feathered vocalists have turned communication into an art form. When a robin or nightingale bursts into song, it's not just whistling for fun. That melody might be declaring territory, attracting a mate, or issuing a polite back off to a rival. Each bird species has its own signature repertoire, and some are astonishingly complex. The lyrebird of Australia, for example, is a master mimic. It can imitate the calls of other birds, the sound of chainsaws, camera shutters, car alarms, and even human speech if it hears it often enough. Think of it as nature's ultimate cover artist. Birdsong is often learned, not just instinctive. Many young birds go through a babbling phase similar to human infants, where they practice and refine their calls by listening to adults. It's a mix of nature and nurture, and in some species, individual birds even develop regional accents. So yes, there are bird dialects. Somewhere out there, a sparrow is judging another sparrow's pronunciation. Move from the trees to the oceans, and you'll find another soundscape entirely. Whales and dolphins have developed some of the most advanced acoustic systems in the animal kingdom. In the deep, dark waters where light fades fast, sound is the language of survival. Humpback whales are perhaps the most famous aquatic singers. Their haunting, echoing songs can last for hours and travel for hundreds of kilometers through the ocean. These songs are thought to be part of mating behavior, though exactly how remains a subject of study. What's remarkable is that entire whale populations will share the same song, and that song will slowly evolve over time. New phrases are introduced, old ones fade away, and the whole thing morphs like a giant underwater musical trend. Scientists have likened it to a whale version of pop music, an acoustic fashion that sweeps through the pod before the next big hit comes along. Dolphins, on the other hand, are less about long droning songs and more about fast, high-frequency chatter. They produce a wide variety of clicks, whistles, and pulsed sounds, for everything from social bonding to echolocation. Echolocation is their built-in sonar system. By sending out a series of clicks and listening to the returning echoes, dolphins can map their surroundings with astonishing accuracy. They can tell the size, shape, and even the material of an object just by the way the sound bounces back. It's like navigating the world by touch, only with sound instead of fingers. Bats use a similar technique. As nocturnal flyers, bats rely heavily on echolocation to hunt insects in total darkness. They emit high-frequency sounds, usually beyond the range of human hearing, and interpret the echoes to locate prey mid-flight. Some species can detect an object as fine as a human hair stretched across a room. That's sonar with style. Interestingly, there's an evolutionary arms race happening between bats and their prey. Some moths have evolved ears that can detect a bat's echolocation clicks, giving them a chance to perform evasive maneuvers. Others emit clicks of their own, either to jam the bat's sonar or to signal that they taste terrible, because nothing says "don't eat me" quite like an auditory billboard. Of course, not all animal communication is about sound that we can hear. Elephants, for instance, are masters of infrasound, low-frequency sounds below the range of human hearing. These deep rumbles can travel through the ground and the air for kilometers, allowing elephants to stay in touch with distant members of their herd. Some of these rumbles are used for coordination, others for mating, and some may even serve as long-distance alerts about danger. Elephants have special adaptations in their feet and trunks to pick up these subtle vibrations, almost like feeling sound rather than hearing it. Wolves and dogs also tap into the power of pitch. A wolf's howl can carry over long distances, helping to bring pack members together or warn off rivals. Each wolf has a unique voice, allowing others to recognize who's calling. Domestic dogs retain this instinct to some degree, which is why your pup might break into song when it hears a siren. It's not just noise, it's ancient pack behavior kicking in. Then there are the insects who may be small but have no intention of staying quiet. Crickets chirp by rubbing their wings together, each species producing a unique pattern of chirps. The frequency and rhythm can even change with temperature. Warmer nights, faster chirps. This phenomenon is so consistent that you can actually estimate the temperature outside by counting cricket chirps. It's like a thermometer with legs. Cicadas, on the other hand, take things to a whole new level. Male cicadas produce one of the loudest sounds in the insect world, thanks to specialized structures on their abdomens called tymbals. When they flex the muscles around these tymbals, they produce a rapid series of clicks that, when repeated quickly enough, create a shrill, pulsating buzz. The result? A chorus that can reach over 100 decibels, rivaling a chainsaw. And why do they do it? For love, of course. It's the cicada equivalent of shouting, "I'm single," from the rooftops. Except it's every male shouting at once, for hours. Even fish get in on the sonic action. Some species produce grunts, growls, or popping noises using their swim bladders, a gas-filled organ used to control buoyancy. These sounds can be used for communication, mating, or warning off intruders. The toadfish, for instance, makes a low-pitched humming sound to attract females during mating season. It's not exactly romantic, but it gets the job done. And then there are animals that generate sound through drumming or percussion. Gorillas beat their chests not just for intimidation, but also as a kind of long-distance signal. Beavers slap their tails on the water's surface to warn others of potential danger. Woodpeckers hammer on trees and occasionally on metal roofs or chimneys, not just to find insects, but to stake out territory. In the natural world, rhythm is communication too. It's also worth noting that some animals are silent because silence itself is a survival tool. Prey species often avoid making noise so they don't attract predators. Others, like owls, have evolved to be exceptionally quiet. An owl's feathers are structured to muffle the sound of flight, allowing it to swoop silently toward its prey. That stealthy approach is deadly effective and eerily impressive. You won't hear it coming until it's too late. Beyond the biological mechanics, animal soundscapes also play a crucial role in ecosystems. The collective noises of a habitat, sometimes called a soundscape, offer important cues to animals. Frogs chorus in wetlands, letting others know the area is wet and fertile. Reef fish orient themselves by the snapping and crackling of healthy coral communities. Birds go silent when predators are near, creating an audible void that other animals can detect. Sound, in these cases, is an environmental map, a way to understand where you are, who's nearby, and whether it's safe to move. Humans too are starting to pay closer attention to these animal sounds, not just for curiosity, but for conservation. Scientists are using acoustic monitoring to track endangered species, detect illegal logging, and measure the health of entire ecosystems. Audio recordings taken over time can reveal changes in biodiversity, shifts in migration patterns, or even the encroachment of human noise. It's a powerful reminder that listening isn't just a sensory act. It's a way to understand and protect the natural world. In fact, human noise itself is starting to change the animal soundtrack. Traffic, shipping lanes, construction, and other forms of anthropogenic noise can interfere with animal communication. Whales in busy shipping routes have to sing louder. Birds in cities shift their calls to higher pitches to be heard over the din. Some species struggle to adapt. Others move away entirely. It's called noise pollution, and it's more than an annoyance, it's a challenge to survival. But despite the noise, animals continue to sing, chirp, grunt, click and call. Their sounds are ancient, intricate, and endlessly fascinating. They reveal how evolution has shaped not just bodies, but voices. How creatures of all sizes have learned to turn vibration into meaning. So the next time you're out in nature, take a moment to really listen. That bird overhead isn't just filling the air with noise. That frog by the pond isn't just croaking for fun. Each sound is a message, a pattern, a code. The natural world is speaking. We just have to remember to tune in. Music is one of those things that feels like it comes from somewhere beyond biology. It's mathematical and emotional, ancient and modern, scientific and deeply, deeply human. We all know that music has the power to make us cry, dance, relax, remember, or even fall in love. But beneath the rhythms and melodies, beneath the lyrics and harmonies, lies something even more fundamental: sound, frequency, and vibration, all working together to tinker with your brain's chemistry in the most delightful ways. Let's start with something deceptively simple. Why does music make us feel things? The answer, as you might expect, involves a combination of physics, biology, psychology, and a healthy dash of magic. Well, okay, Not real magic, but it can certainly feel that way. At its core, music is just organized sound, vibrations moving through air, forming patterns of rhythm and pitch that our brains latch onto. But these patterns are anything but random. Across cultures and centuries, people have intuitively gravitated towards certain structures, scales, chords, rhythms that seem to resonate with something deep inside us. And when you dig into the science, it turns out there's a reason for that. Take consonance and dissonance. Consonant intervals, like octaves, fifths and thirds, are combinations of notes that sound smooth, stable, and pleasant to most human ears. Dissonant intervals, like tritones or minor seconds, can sound tense, edgy, or unsettling. The difference lies in the mathematical relationship between the frequencies. When two notes vibrate at frequencies that form simple ratios, like 2:1, 3:2, or 4:3, they tend to align well, producing sound waves that reinforce each other. Our brains interpret this alignment as harmonious. When the ratios are more complex, the waveforms interfere in ways that create a sense of clash or tension. But here's where it gets interesting. We don't just hear these differences, we feel them. When you hear a gentle consonant lullaby, your brain releases chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, which promote pleasure, bonding, and relaxation. When the music builds to a dissonant crescendo, it triggers a surge of adrenaline and cortisol, heightening your alertness and emotional response. Then, when the tension resolves back into consonance, your brain rewards you with another hit of dopamine. It's the sonic version of a roller coaster, thrilling, dramatic, and oddly addictive. This emotional ride is partly why music is such a powerful storytelling tool. Even without lyrics, a melody can suggest sadness, joy, longing, triumph, or mystery. Minor keys tend to sound melancholic. Major keys tend to sound bright. Slow tempos can feel solemn or reflective. Fast tempos feel energetic or anxious. Composers and songwriters wield these tools like emotional paintbrushes, layering rhythms, harmonies, and dynamics to guide your feelings. But why does our brain care so much about these patterns? One theory is that music taps into the same neural circuitry we use to detect and predict patterns in our environment. From an evolutionary standpoint, recognizing patterns, like the approach of footsteps, the rhythm of a heartbeat, or the rustle of wind in the trees, was crucial to survival. Music, with its structured patterns of repetition and variation, hijacks that system in the most enjoyable way. When your brain successfully predicts the next beat or note, it experiences a small reward. But if the music surprises you, maybe with an unexpected chord or a syncopated rhythm, that can also trigger pleasure, especially if the surprise feels intentional or clever. It's a delicate dance between expectation and novelty, and your brain is constantly solving the puzzle in real time. Of course, music isn't just about the brain. Your whole body gets in on the act. Think about what happens when you hear a driving bass line. You start tapping your foot, nodding your head, maybe even dancing. That's your motor system syncing up with the rhythm. The beat becomes a physical experience, not just an auditory one. Some scientists believe this is because of a phenomenon called rhythmic entrainment, your brain's natural tendency to synchronize its internal rhythms with external stimuli. That's why you feel the urge to walk in step with music, or why exercise feels easier with a good playlist. Your body is aligning with the beat. Then there's the connection between music and memory. Just a few notes of a familiar song can transport you back in time, to a first dance, a road trip, a summer afternoon. Music has a unique ability to unlock memories, especially emotional ones. That's because music activates multiple regions of the brain at once, including the hippocampus, which is involved in memory, and the amygdala, which processes emotion. The combination of rhythm, melody, and emotional context creates a kind of mental glue, making the memory more vivid and easier to retrieve. This link is so strong that music is increasingly being used in therapies for people with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of memory loss. Patients who struggle to remember names or recognize loved ones may still sing along to songs from their youth, complete with lyrics and harmonies. In some cases, music becomes a lifeline to the past, a way to reconnect with identity, even when much else has faded. Music also has measurable effects on the body. Studies have shown that listening to calming music can lower blood pressure, slow heart rate, reduce anxiety, and improve sleep quality. On the flip side, upbeat music can boost energy, enhance endurance during exercise, and improve focus during mental tasks. It's not just a background soundtrack, it's a physiological tool. Your heart might not beat in time with the music, but it definitely pays attention. Even the kind of instrument matters. Different timbres, those unique qualities that distinguish a trumpet from a flute or a piano from a guitar, can evoke different emotional reactions. A solo cello might sound mournful, a bright piano might feel cheerful, and a distorted electric guitar might add a sense of urgency or rebellion. These associations are shaped by culture, personal experience, and even the physics of the instruments themselves. And let's not forget about the voice, the original instrument. The human voice carries an emotional weight that goes beyond melody. We're wired to pick up on tiny changes in tone, pitch, and rhythm in speech, which is why singing can feel so intimate and expressive. A single held note can convey longing, a vibrato can add vulnerability, a sudden change in dynamics can send chills down your spine. It's no wonder that vocal music dominates charts, choirs, and lullabies alike. Speaking of lullabies, there's a reason they exist in nearly every culture. Soft, repetitive melodies help soothe infants by mimicking the rhythms and tones they heard in the womb. A steady tempo, gentle pitch, and calming tone create a sense of safety and predictability, helping babies and their exhausted parents fall asleep. It's music doing what it's always done best, providing comfort and connection. Music's emotional power also extends to community and social bonding. Singing or dancing together triggers the release of oxytocin, a hormone associated with trust and bonding. That's why people feel more connected after singing in a choir, chanting at a protest, or even just belting out karaoke at a party. It creates a shared emotional experience, a kind of social glue that strengthens group identity. Even musical dissonance has its place. It's the tension that makes the resolution feel satisfying. It's the storm before the calm. Without a bit of friction, music might feel flat or predictable. Great composers and great pop producers understand this instinctively. They build tension through chord progressions, unresolved melodies, or rhythmic complexity, and then release it in a way that feels earned. That resolution activates reward centers in your brain, giving you that familiar, spine-tingling sensation that music lovers often describe as the chills. In fact, some researchers have studied this very phenomenon. The chills, or frisson as it's known in neuroscience, occur when music triggers a sudden release of dopamine, often during particularly emotional or unexpected moments in a song. It might be a soaring crescendo, a sudden key change, a perfectly timed pause. Whatever it is, your brain reacts as if something profound just happened, and in a way it did. Music is a kind of emotional shorthand, a language that doesn't need words. It speaks directly to the nervous system, to memory, to movement, and to the heart. Whether it's a symphony or a folk tune, a dance beat or a hymn, music connects us to ourselves and to each other in a way few other things can. So the next time you press play, take a moment to appreciate what's happening. Tiny vibrations travel through the air, reach your ears, and spark a cascade of electrical signals in your brain. You might smile, you might cry, you might tap your foot, you might remember something you thought you'd forgotten. That's not just entertainment. That's the physics of emotion. That's the science of music. And it's all built on sound. Sound, in all its humble invisibility, has always been a force for connection. But now, in our increasingly advanced and digital world, we're learning not just to hear sound, but to bend it, direct it, scan with it, heal with it, and even sculpt it. The future of sound isn't just about speakers and microphones anymore. It's about precise, purposeful waves engineered to do amazing things. From medical imaging to levitating objects in mid-air, sound is stepping into a whole new frontier, quietly but powerfully. Let's begin with something you've probably heard of: ultrasound. Not just the gentle hum of prenatal checkups, but a whole spectrum of sound that's above the range of human hearing, frequencies higher than 20,000 hertz. We might not be able to hear it, but that doesn't mean we're not using it constantly. Ultrasound works by sending out high-frequency sound waves and measuring how they bounce back when they hit something. In medical settings, those returning echoes are used to create detailed images of the inside of the body. The principle is similar to echolocation, like the kind bats and dolphins use, only it's done with machines and gel instead of wings and fins. What's remarkable is that ultrasound isn't just good at detecting what's inside, it's also wonderfully safe. Because it uses mechanical sound waves instead of radiation, like X-rays or CT scans, it's often the preferred choice for monitoring sensitive areas, like a developing fetus or a beating heart. And modern ultrasound machines can do more than just produce flat, black and white images. With advanced processing, they can now show real-time video, measure blood flow, and even produce 3D renderings that let parents-to-be admire their baby's nose months before birth. But ultrasound isn't limited to obstetrics. It's also used in cardiology to examine the heart, in emergency rooms to quickly assess internal injuries, and in physical therapy to apply deep heat to muscles and tissues. Researchers are even developing focused ultrasound treatments that can precisely destroy tumors or break up kidney stones, non-invasively, using nothing but sound. And it doesn't stop there. There's a rapidly growing field called therapeutic ultrasound, where carefully focused sound waves are used to stimulate or disrupt cells, open up the blood-brain barrier to allow medications to pass through, or even trigger drug release at specific locations in the body. It's like delivering medicine with the precision of a symphony, each frequency playing its part. Now take that idea of precision sound and turn it into a tool for moving objects. Yes, sound can move things. This is the domain of acoustic levitation, using carefully arranged ultrasonic waves to suspend small objects in mid-air. It sounds like science fiction, and in some ways it looks like it too. But it's very real. When two or more ultrasonic waves intersect just right, they create regions of high and low pressure, standing waves. At the nodes of these standing waves, the pressure can be so perfectly balanced that small particles can be held aloft against gravity. Scientists have used this method to levitate droplets of water, small beads, and even tiny pieces of electronics. Some researchers have even managed to move these objects around mid-air by adjusting the position of the sound waves in real time. It's like having a pair of invisible hands sculpted out of sound. This technology isn't just for party tricks or futuristic juggling acts. Acoustic levitation has potential applications in clean manufacturing, where even the smallest contamination from touching a surface could be a problem. Think of pharmaceuticals or microchips. If you can move something without physically touching it, you avoid the risk of damage or infection. Plus, it's just incredibly cool. Sound is also being used to shape materials in entirely new ways. Acoustic tweezers, high-frequency sound fields that can move and manipulate cells, are opening up possibilities in biomedical research. These devices can sort cells by type, position them with microscopic accuracy, or even guide them into specific patterns for tissue engineering, all without sharp instruments or chemical labels, just sound. And the idea of sculpting with sound doesn't end with the microscopic. Audio holography is a technique where an array of speakers can be programmed to focus sound into specific shapes in space. These shapes can be felt in mid-air as force, pushing against your hand, for instance, or creating virtual buttons that you can press without touching anything. It's a technology that merges sound and touch, allowing for touchless interfaces in medicine, public devices, or virtual reality systems. This brings us to one of the most exciting intersections of sound and tech: human-computer interaction. In recent years, developers have begun exploring ways to use sound to create immersive, interactive experiences that go beyond traditional screens and keyboards. Gesture recognition systems can use ultrasonic sound to detect the movement of your hands or fingers in mid-air, turning the space in front of your laptop into an invisible control panel. Smart speakers use far-field microphones and advanced audio processing to identify and localize your voice, even in noisy rooms. And in virtual reality and augmented reality, 3D audio is transforming how we experience digital worlds. By carefully simulating how sound would bounce off surfaces and reach your ears from different angles, audio engineers can create spatial soundscapes that feel incredibly real. The footsteps of a character behind you, the echo of a cave, the distant rumble of thunder, they all help trick your brain into believing you're somewhere else. And since our ears are sensitive to minute differences in timing and frequency, the illusion is surprisingly effective. Another emerging frontier is sonic branding, using specific tones or sound logos to identify companies, products, or services. Just as you recognize a company by its visual logo, you might instantly associate a short musical phrase with a phone, a car, or a streaming platform. These sound signatures are designed to be memorable, emotionally resonant, and instantly recognizable, like a musical handshake. And as digital assistants become more common, sound is becoming part of how machines express emotion and intent. A rising tone might indicate success. A falling one could signal failure. These auditory cues are short, subtle, and universal, bridging the gap between machine language and human understanding. It's a reminder that sound isn't just about entertainment, it's also about communication, design, and emotional intelligence. Of course, as we unlock new ways to use sound, we also uncover new responsibilities. Sonic privacy is becoming a real concern. With devices that can detect conversations from across the room, or even monitor people's movements using ultrasound reflections, questions about consent and data protection are increasingly important. As with all powerful technologies, the key is to find balance, harnessing the potential of sound without letting it echo into areas we'd rather keep quiet. On a more philosophical note, the evolution of sound technology also changes how we define silence. As our soundscapes become increasingly complex, filled with notifications, digital voices, and environmental audio, silence becomes a commodity. The ability to retreat into quiet or to curate your own sound environment becomes a form of well-being. Technologies like noise-cancelling headphones, sound therapy apps, and personal sound zones are all responses to this new acoustic reality. And then there's the frontier we're only beginning to explore, using sound to map and understand the world in entirely new ways. Scientists have used sonar to explore the ocean floor, ultrasound to examine the human body, and infrasound to detect volcanic eruptions and nuclear tests from thousands of kilometers away. Even animals, with their sophisticated biological sonar systems, remind us that sound is more than just noise. It's a tool for perception, connection, and survival. We're even beginning to use sound to help artificial intelligence understand the world. Audio processing algorithms can now recognize speech, identify speakers, detect emotions, and even hear the acoustic fingerprint of a room to figure out where it is. Machines are learning to listen, not just to understand us, but to understand their environment. As we look ahead, one thing is clear: the science of sound is no longer confined to the realm of music, speech, or communication. It's becoming a force for innovation in health, technology, design, and science. It's reshaping how we interact with machines, how we experience digital worlds, and how we understand the physical one. So the next time you hear a tone, a ping, or a gentle hum from a machine, know that it might be more than just feedback. It could be a wave of data, a scan, a command, a touchless interaction, or the sound of a droplet levitating quietly above an ultrasonic speaker. The future of sound is happening right now, all around us, often just above the threshold of hearing. It's a world of silent symphonies and whispering machines, a world where vibration becomes vision and sound becomes something you can feel, see, and even hold. And in this world, the smallest frequency might carry the biggest ideas. And so, here we are, at the quiet end of our journey through the science of sound. We've drifted with vibrations through air, danced with frequencies and amplitudes, sung with wails, soared past the sound barrier, and even levitated droplets with ultrasound. From the primal rhythm of a heartbeat to the precision of focused sonic waves, sound has proven to be far more than just something we hear. It's a force that shapes our world, connects us to one another, stirs emotion, and, when harnessed by science, can even heal, lift, and reveal. But after all that, we come full circle to the simplest and perhaps most profound question of all. What is sound, really? It's motion made meaningful. Pressure turned perception. It's the universe vibrating in just the right way to be heard by a thinking brain. Sometimes it's thunder, sometimes it's a whisper, and sometimes it's the sound of your own thoughts in the stillness. And if you've made it this far, still with me at the tail end of this gentle sonic journey, thank you for listening. I hope it helped you unwind. I hope it taught you something new. And I hope it wasn't so interesting that it kept you wide awake. Though if it did, at least you've now got some solid trivia about whales, supersonic flight, and levitating objects to keep you company in the dark. Before we part ways for now, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? Whether it's a sleepy midnight in Melbourne, an early dawn in Dublin, or a lazy afternoon somewhere in between, feel free to leave a comment below and say hello. And if you enjoyed our time together in this cozy corner of science, please do consider liking and subscribing. It helps more curious minds find their way here, and it lets me keep making these calming journeys for you, one softly spoken topic at a time. Until next time, this has been The Sleepy Scientist. Wishing you peaceful thoughts, pleasant dreams, and the quiet comfort of knowing that even the silence around you is filled with the gentle hum of a world in motion. Sleep well,